Advantage of what is warming the window for avoiding the climate catastrophe is closing. The only way to tipping points fast enough is U.S. border insurance and carbon tax. Until the world has until 2030 and impairment purchase change to avoid catastrophic warming. The only way to take forward action to carbon tax with border adjustment frauding and rebate for tax paid in the U.S. When products are exported and border taxes are performed because rates were pushed supply. Only the U.S. they want to share American companies for low price imports. Companies have been required border emissions for organization agreed upon methodologies allocated emissions policies have been measured scores prepared extensive analysis demonstrating GHG levels in the U.S. and abroad can be determined using well-established standards. The tax is easily municipal bond posting and option tax years can be consistent with the WTO rules tag because tax can be rebated when goods are exported. Companies will not be at a disadvantage. Action must be taken quickly and fast when to get reduction in emissions. Home on discourage leakage and compete in the broadest water adjusting carbon tax. Climate change causes station Chem 23 U.S. Massive station involved climatic change station to go through the vulnerability system transformers and the fields human general process of complex cross-field relationship and climate is company wide ozone depletion, biospheric integrity, ocean acidification, freshwater use, and system change eastbound lead to differences that can be pushed into instability. Risk comes not just from climate changes but human response to risk. Could a cascade large amounts of warming may not be needed to trigger catastrophe. Risk cascades exist under a fog of uncertainty. Climate change can worsen to trigger conflicts. It escalates new and existing hotspots. Urban 24 climate change might alter the security environment. The hottest places were hotter countries. See widespread conflict. People might fight for water or minerals. They can migrate. Shredding resources, support governance, economic hardship, and even conflicts spill over future climate interacts with other conflict drivers. Climate change could worsen the conflict in a way that most exists and also capture climate change as an element of uncertainty. Ocean acidification destroys biodiversity. Swordkowski 19. Ocean design taking us with the ocean acidification speed is the most rapid change in ocean chemistry. Geopolitical cancer rise disruptions affect millions. Threats could cause a number of feathers the ability to feed air to acidification pose an existential threat to the ocean. Humans unless the tide turns in. Life will be no more. That threat is mass ocean extinction. Emissions reduction is now solved in the 10. Japan induces 2200 high emissions extinction risk arrival past massive stations limited warming to 2 degrees Celsius. One of the cut the severity of extinctions by less than 70% of vulnerable regions are also home to many of the world's most productive fisheries. Global extinction risk is greater for polar species. The impact of accelerating climate changes and drought extinction risk higher ocean acidification decline productivity amplify these losses. However, not too late reduction to emissions are avoiding major extinction event. Every fraction of a degree matters. Variations such just the 10th result in saving millions working 24 how long the temperature stays long for us important all it's not lost. The increase in temperature by 2 degrees shorter irreversible tipping points. Rapid glacier mode collapsing coral reefs and thawing permafrost exponentially accelerating climate change. Tipping points would bring devastating losses to ecosystems and human lives before tipping points after climate change causes damage. Stress is already here, but it's not zero sum of any mode of warming to is worth the average temperature. The consequences between 1.5 versus 2 preventing the extra half degree could save 120 million from heat waves and put 10.4 million from sea level rise. Prevent 700,000 square miles of permafrost from thawing and reduce crop failures. High ocean temperatures cause major disruptions in ecosystem wildfires, droughts, floods, hurricanes, storm surges, algae blooms, invasive species, vector-borne diseases, crop failure, economic hardship. We got in the taste wall 1.5 would feel like air. AFF climate models underestimate the risk by 23 warming have been fast and worse. Positive feedbacks are not fully accounted for, and models IPCC have been conservative. Even 1 degree Celsius per sugar tipping points are warming 4 times faster. And climate models underestimate amplification of permafrost emissions and feedback loops are not accounted for. The thermal maximum for photosynthesis had been exceeded. Adaptation without mitigation will fail. The world is warming too fast. Climate is not 22. Dangers of climate change are mounting zero. They could overwhelm the ability to have unless GHG emissions are reduced. Efforts are too incremental. Temperatures keep rising. The water face limits on how much they can adapt. If nations fail / fossil fuel emissions war will suffer unavoidable loss. Even humanity's best efforts to adapt could faulty rising seas exceed what nations can afford. The plan solves carbon tax, reduces economy-wide emissions by 87% by 2050. Work reduction of $40 per ton CO2, rising 5% each year on emissions cost the economy. GHG emissions reduction, accelerate new tech deployment, support innovation more than doubled emissions reduction compared to 2025, 2050. Put the U.S. economy on a trajectory to nearly meet its targets. 40% of reduction by 2030, 87% reduction by 2050. No other option can read the U.S. as close. It incentivizes a massive shift towards low carbon tech and hard to decarbonize sectors. So bond each economy-wide carbon price will incentivize innovation deployment. Low carbon tech, cheap, low carbon tech do not exist for the industrial or ag and the reduce emissions prices. The uniquely capable of rising the revenue that can be used to fund R&D war cheap tech to exist price will deployment that scale cement renewables are natural gas. It's try or die. Even Trump cannot stop the transition, but it's just a matter of speed. Hope this 11-7 Trump will not be able to undo everything Trump make regs, but even without the wind and solar, the cheapest source of new energy, wind and solar are eating away fossil fuels. That a trend that will continue. The only question is how fast tax growth are replaced until 2030. Now the focus will be on making sure this happens as quickly as possible. There's no sound wasting speeding the transition. This year started to end up as the hottest year in human history. There's fresh evidence that the long-period climate tipping points are arriving. New data show that not only did global forests absorb very little carbon last year, bottles of wetlands are now emitting methane. Shifts stall the green paradox. Man at 18 motivated by profit. Paradox makes sense, but no empirical evidence that companies are pursuing such a course. More data is more tax appear. Companies seek profitable alternatives. All investments would exert the shark flows known as possibilities. We're going to become more expensive. Carbon tax model results show that when taxes are announced, investment dominates the green paradox. Border adjustments prevent leakage and cement lasting decarbonization. TAM model at 24 entry represents over 37% of global emissions. BCA alone can only target trade likely to be more successful implemented with domestic action adjustments. Ensure domestic emission reductions are not offset by increases in other countries. Place an incentive on exporters to minimize emissions to retain market share. Incentivize innovation, clear production process. If allowed to defeat beyond borders. This innovation channel could be the most significant in emissions reductions potential. Revenue, funds, compliance costs more. Resigning branch 1 2 carbon tax would have low emission and compliance cost similar consumption taxes raise a lot of revenue relative to cost, even if developing advanced ways to track foreign emissions could be difficult. The carbon tax side to be less expensive from an administrative compliance perspective. The plan the United States federal government should adopt a clean energy policy in the United States, including a carbon price of $40 per ton CO2, rising not 5% over inflation each year with a commensurate border adjustment. Advantage to is trade. A wave of diverging U.S.-EU climate policies or forthcoming negotiations temporarily deferred protections application to 2026, leaving only a year to avoid a transatlantic trade war, multilateral methanol trade. The 24th centerpiece of EU strategy, the climate change system of the U.S. reflects the subsidy-focused strategy after the year of negotiations by announced temporary hold of the statement of Section 232 tariffs came in 2026, even only a year to find a compromise, which is imperative to avoid the trade war, but also to prevent backtracking the climate policies that could reverberate globally, forging the transatlantic climate could be the foundation for multilateral cooperation and could accelerate global fragmentation of clean energy markets. The result was frequent cross-border trade wars, launching toward the efforts to make the climate change, bringing governments into conflict clashes over climate stringent alliances and the global trading system policies could result in more frequent cross-border trade wars, pitting close allies against one another, wedding fractures in an already fragile system of trade. The EU's free trade's last line of defense, failure to compromise, permanently weakens the WTO and erodes the fabric of global trade modes, of which are 22 last big defender of rules-based arbitration. The EU is about to follow the world's largest 20 block itself on free trade. The entire global economy will be hurt. Such an outcome seems likely. The key trigger is not Chinese aggression, but reforms emanating from Biden. The law was seen as a slap in the face of trade war for the U.S. and the United States' interest, but a response will be needed that the EU, one of the last big defeaters of free believers in free trade, though the towel would not just undermine the global trade rule, but weaken the WTO, but also send a key signal other countries forget about the rules. Escalating trade wars, collapse, containment of existential threats like prolonged disease, tech, and triggers World War III. Oppenheimer turned one environmental defense health. The tech failures for the world to find our future infrastructure forces, impact capacity, power to settle inevitable shocks, decoupling and produce an increase in polarization and cross-border conflict, weaken institutions and norms, and reduce capacity to confront warming tech change, nuclear weapons, and the prolonged increasing interaction now produces not harmonization but friction, escalating trade disputes. Measures gain traction will become clear to states that a global system entails escalating risks, and so will ending globalization. A world is suffering from excess savings will respond with retrench with the political effects will be damaging. It fuels nationalism, to which contributes to conflict, trade wars, leading World War III, economic constraints on aggression, or eroding trade wars by reducing the interdependence that can see what the current moment. It's year than pre-1914. There are many hotspots: Korea, SES, Taiwan, where Kinley seems right. Protectionism is inevitable, absent the plan. Establishing border adjustments avoids fragmentation through trade harmonization. Also, in Board of 24 pursuit of net zero control economic fragmentation to make sure to more resilient and protective measures raise the cost of the transition. The U.S. wants to strengthen its economic ties. Border adjustments could be an antidote to fragmentation of the U.S. border duties and imports with a domestic tax that could create incentives for other nations to follow suit. The EU already adopts such a combination. Australia and Canada are considering border measures in the EU, and UK has announced a tariff implemented by 2027. The establishment of a border mechanism could create a climate club that encourages climate measures. Countries will adapt rather than retaliate. Work 21 together. The EU and the US make up more than 40% of the global economy. The most attractive markets of retaliation will hamper access. BCA's herald a fundamental change in global trade machine. Trade disputes will dissipate disputes through the WTO. Take years and are not only the undermined adjustments to top turning most much for permanent shifts and trade with benefits are too important, especially if the switch to pricing stable and inevitable. Countries will avoid liability by applying their own carbon fees. The plan solves for harmonizing US-EU pricing policy, encourages a follow-on confidence 23 rising trade tension between the EU as an EU could undermine climate initiatives fail to align risk, stoking trade tensions. The strong transatlantic partnership is a prerequisite to greening the global economy. The US has failed to adopt the national carbon price subsidies won't reduce emissions. The US cannot pursue the EU approach without a national carbon price legislation to create a US carbon border adjustment, including domestic carbon price would create a basis for a global compromise, with the EU pursuing a compromise rather than confidently create a powerful coalition that encourages low carbon industrial production around the globe, including in China and India, without ceding domestic advantages. Trump tariffs, double AFF solvency wrap year 11. Climate activists concerned about Trump priorities affect emissions. Chinese emissions are doubled by increasing the cost of Chinese products. The tariffs can reduce the demand for high carbon imports, restore and reduce emissions, effectiveness, attention to the ability to ramp up domestic production. Tariffs influence consumer behavior, border adjustments, target emissions. This can incentivize China to transition away. The effectiveness of the strategy depends on the U.S. capacity to manage trade tensions. Tariffs mitigate climate change. Strong U.S.-EU alliances and impact filter stoked. The U.S. and EU would face challenges that threaten alive to pandemic recession, climate China, protect the combination of security capacities, transcend borders that cannot be dealt with alone. The relationship has weathered storms by past performance. There's no assurance of future success in the face of existential challenges. Neither the U.S. nor EU can act alone. We can set an example for the world, laying the foundation for broader cooperation to cope with global challenges.
I'm good for class.
Cool. You're good.
Yes.
Henry.
Oh.
Sorry, what did you say?
Yeah, it's good. There's also no echoing.
Okay, great. Perfect, thank you. Okay. I want to start on the Stokes evidence. Why is China rising?
Why is China rising? I don't think the 1AC gives a single explanation for why China rises.
No.
Rises,
Okay.
but
What are
our
China's
evidence indicates
ambitions?
that China has a growing interest in clean technology.
No, the Stokes evidence says that a rising China, growing competition, and emerging security threats. This is clearly in the context of geopolitics.
It creates
What are their
national security threats for the United States.
Okay, the Stokes evidence says, quote, the U.S. and Europe face challenges that threaten their way of life. What is the U.S. way of life?
Well, in the context of the impact card, it says that pandemics, recessions, China will alter national security
No,
behavior.
those are
and also
threats. Those are threats that are threatening the U.S. way of life. What is the U.S. way of life?
Well, the 1EC does not define what the way of life is. It's just living.
How does the U.S. way of life change absent successful
Well, it's probably
containment of
in
China?
the context of democratic values, which are trade
Democratic
evidence
values.
indicates that's more
Okay.
likely to.
And absent successful containment of China, how do those democratic values change?
Because
or ways of life change?
China would not accede to multilateral rules.
China
Because
authoritarian, U.S. democratic. Okay.
most likely.
The rapier evidence, it says that the effectiveness of the AFF hinges on the U.S. ability to, quote, ramp up domestic production and supply chains. What does that entail?
That entails the United States developing their own pipelines for clean energy technology rather than importing it from abroad.
Why is that
Develops
good?
it domestically, huh?
Why is that good? You said that
Because
trade
it-
harmonization is good, now you're defending
Right,
protectionism.
and that no, because then the United States can export those goods in a world in which they have a secure supply chain.
Awesome. It says increasing costs of Chinese products, consumers and businesses seek alternatives. I'm guessing the alternative is U.S. onshore products.
Most likely.
Okay, cool. Why is boxing China out of global clean energy markets good?
It does not box China out of clean energy markets. Our evidence indicates that
You
China
said
would
you harmonize trade regimes to onshore to Western countries.
not just
Increase
Western
tariffs on
countries.
China.
We
To
already
be-
have evidence that
To be clear, our stance is that the border adjustment creates global follow-on in a regime of decarbonization. The plan then incentivizes China to reduce their emitting potential.
You have defended a BCA as a mechanism to take U.S. imports from China and onshore them to the EU and the United States.
Well,
and you
no,
said this
but-
followed on and
no,
harmonized by the
because
rest of the
Kaufman
globe.
says that
So
if-
I'm not sure how you can
no.
defend not boxing out of China or
No, Kaufman literally
anti-protectionism
says
against
that China would respond by enacting their own domestic price so that they're not boxed out. They're not going to be taxed by the U.S. BCA. The way a BCA works is if China has a national price, then they're not subject to our taxes. It's the reference in our
I
Kaufman
have one
evidence
more
to the
question.
climate plan.
The Oppenheimer evidence says that the terminal impacts to trade wars are in South Asia, for example, like Korea, SCS, Taiwan. How does U.S.-EU trade harmonization solve that?
Because it signals a commitment to multilateral rules, so rather than escalating conflicts, they'll defer to international institutions.
If
to mediate
China wanted to
conflict.
invade Taiwan, why is trade key to them deferring?
Because it creates an economic interdependence and creates an economic guardrail in those conflicts, so China
Economic,
has not
your
interest.
argument is that economic interdependence exists now because the U.S. is trading with China. The AFF makes it so that the U.S. imports less from China. How do you
No,
access
again,
economic
it's the
interdependence?
BCA. We're not tariffs on China now.
One and two consent. It's one off, advantage one, advantage two. Hunter, can you hear me all right?
Yep. Okay, fun fact, so much of debate docs is in my promotions tab, guys. It is crazy how much is in there.
That.
Sorry, you just said one off.
Just one off, yeah.
I haven't gotten it yet.
I haven't either, but I'll get it. Do you guys have it?
No.
I just got it, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Mine is always very slow, so please don't get on me.
Okay, Gabe, Ricker, y'all both good? You're not good?
We're good. I'm not good.
Sorry, Jared.
I'm good.
Okay, is anyone not ready? The plan is a testing ground for circumvention, greenwashing, extractivism, technological precarity, and geopolitical contention. Decarbonization escalates, financialized digitalization through supply chain hegemony while invisibilizing fossil fuel consumption. Brody, 23 climate charges to make sure protects and reforms to manage decarbonization, advertising, goods efficiency, data sustainable, is not political, but technical, to coincide with green infrastructure to manage digital growth. Net zero promise to constitute abstract field mathematics, political ecologies, into accounting letters, scientific, techno-scientific rationalities, obscure growing research, sensitivity of data, networks of green extractivism are short of through digital systems, greenwashing, regulatory transformation, global politics, and solar versus self-regulation as frameworks for uptake, market dynamics, decline, adaptation, reshaping relation to extractive sector practices, renewable energy, green extractive systems, aim at legitimizing the sustainability of sectors associated with green future marginalized justice where workers enable styles to represent the logic and practice of government that applies calculated rationality so the raw mineral extension or data infrastructure processes by natural structure become justified data infrastructure is unsustainable management aligned with data center energy intensiveness, datafication, directly shaping landscape, decarbonization, land-made center, multinational data centers, facilities to manage contradictions, digital and renewable systems, integrated supply chains into a loop of efficiencies which accelerates extraction outside using significant amounts of energy, specific regions, functional limit computing needs even more infrastructure build out on a global scale, line frontiers, multiplied offset energy use, data centers are critically key to systems to get them net zero, making systems saturated inequality, destruction of the environment, marginal people are represented as undifferentiated beneficiaries of the sectors, decarbonized market data centers, after building status to the green, imperative of state, energy policy, wind, solar, geothermal require, processing, digitalizing, potential coordination of extraction and delivery of data energy is operationalized across systems, discursively managed tool, decarbonization, price, data centers are proposed solutions, sharing grid, flexibility, consider potential tech downturn, public service, scalable expansion, digital technology, energy systems are interdependent, not interoperable, negative solutions proposed, data by tool, which renewables in their supply chain can be managed, solutions are individual nodes through which demand transitions rather than infrastructural network expansion will require sacrifices in infrastructure, intensifying require mechanisms to territorial and environmental control from policing to geoengineering and intensifying links with supply chain to institutionalizing models designed to reach structural precarity within the operation value of the funds this marginal. The trade scenario as illusion does not equal global harmonization, statistically empirically Western dominated trade blocks cause imperial overstretch and inequality in every metric. Kennedy, 17 colonial legacy continues in deep-rooted inequality with parts of indigenous peoples, the bottom 50% of less than 5% of all indigenous peoples and ethnic minorities are disproportionately represented. International trade governments, legislative policies, policies in the favor of the global and the expense of the local and poor interests are subordinate to the micro level of global trade and geopolitical influence. Irregular occurrence of violence, including wars, abuse, massacres, riots, as shows common denominators of material grounds are massive civilization and cultural. This argument of violence within economic and social and cultural matters groups and contradict their expecting to five combat and solidarity limits their belief in capital psychology, individual competitiveness, rigorous and documentation shows up periodically of today. Growing wealth gaps those with the capacity of simply periodic crisis of capitalism, the reduction of access to water, failed to gain little material gaining life outcomes, unless with concentration of wealth and starting measures have affected energy populism being swayed by massive systemic unevenness with rigorous and nationalism, racial, cultural arguments. Carbon taxes escalate green colonialism, destroys indigenous communities, enables outsourcing, redirects capital flows from sovereign development to Western industries. Pfeffer, 23, a new green colonialism dominates our self-relation, carbon intensive vendors that realize self-reliant profits, emissions outsourcing, allowing countries to appear virtuous or renewable sources, regards critical minerals, rest also wood as a having terrible conflicts for indigenous communities, 730s processing take place in the global south, copper focus wherever the state emissions to CBAM is supposed to reduce the leak of a CBAM in the global south. The double whammy, exporting countries will find their products no longer competitive. The many ingredients will help the industries get not in the global south. The competition that enables resembles a colonial era rush to secure pricing, guarantees carbon commodification, functionalization, assumes the state's corporate logistics dictate one can authorize violence if you pay for it, deters pollution, shipment, completely disregards growth at any cost. Article 17 defines externality that needs to be internalized. Carbon dioxide is constituted as a commodity to out of process encapsulating purity things to be put as internal external CO2 fungible in terms of different CHGs and different layers replacing something less and tangible fungibility that the unit index will relationship with environmental governance fungibility reflecting the assumption that this compensating emissions can be carried out to any part of the world with the carbon the same pattern as other commodities of colonial history of bodies, power, asymmetries between the edges of all the world, persistent second core coming to pursue clean development of carbon, emerging with mystical power and best outlining alternative means producing this under today market style really thinking about climate change value, chain integration because eco-imperial warfare efficiency rebounds and resource crunches double bind other backups, kill solvency or popularity magnifies escalation. Brandon was on 24 greening of value chain centralized companies growing demand renewable energy leading conflict worldwide. The Chinese policy winning power blocks directed outwards. The U.S. is resisting the shape and increasing the Western policy versus China, increasing eco-imperial tensions are prevented for the digital green change and twin transitions which begin to reach out by the inevitable expanding economy eventual to acquisition either hinder incentive climate policy to support effective measures and a manner that takes are anticipating the problems of the market-based solutions institutions function less effectively worse, lucrative to decarbonization transparent results in escalation, reject the security sustainability necklace policy documents confirm unilateral approach green national means the outcomes integrated into rising faster than great power competition and regulatory circumvention. Rio Franco's 17 and attribution to dependency on hegemonic influencing energy economies, economic society, trying to oppose the threat of dependency to Chinese military directed RE ship and setting up our dependent response to Obama green nationalists from receptive to policy promote production as entire supply chain. The end of Trump administration's authoritative activity to reduce dependence on foreign minerals reliance on China weakens competitiveness against the geopolitical disadvantage state and capital collaborating securely extractive inputs of renewable energy by running these efforts here and resilient supply chains are essential for our national security. Foreign resilience will not be able to defeat this national security issue. The U.S. depends on countries that develop supply chains strong with floating and reduce reliance despite the shift away from globalization, domestic extractions, economic logic, policymakers need sustainable production as the West last hope to resume its manufacturing prowess. Environmental goals of the geoeconomic logic area where Europe needs to increase resilience in preparation for potential disruptions due to crisis intentions coming from security and sustainability. Merge security is priority. Sustainability is now vital to its profitability. Bulwark against economic fences. Public-private alliances were set by tenants. Corporate policy now resolve the contradiction between economic efficiency and environmental sustainability concerns about regulatory dimension of green. Industrial policy manifests in corporate response to auto industry control increase sustainability goals of lobbying to the framing protects the industry interests and the positions of sectors of climate safe reveal the contradiction within the security sustainability of decision makers are encoding power relations into the energy system secure and sustainable vice versa. Key determining the outcome of the process of movements, road disruption trades, national coordination, complicated onshore and preliminary map of technical tension for unequal ecological change, phones call for interdisciplinary research and a vote negative to endorse logistical assistance asserting net zero carbon infrastructure describes white exploits critical choke points and carbon channels to unite global movements, establish welfare democracy and eliminate multinational capture focus and summons. 19 logistical resistance and strategic disruptions increase bargaining power of worker-based public awareness. 4 nuclear waste transport to pipelines to serve active south construction infrastructure refusal by running systems not in operation. 3 offensive functions breaches self-evidence disruption to against potential connections and defenses visible possible. Makes it, strike at one point makes it take them invisible all the way to fact-finding impossible. The one who the more forms the go to distance emerge from carbon channels, workers of junks, the possession game, losing power from the concentration of energy was full. They could disrupt the inclusion of family warfare, moxie, no deliberately made. This is important to disrupt financial systems, supply chains, people have reported the wealth of taking over the system, the transaction architecture of the logistics, upgrading neutral points, movements, increasing tax and logistics resistance, long changing global routes of global capital, local disrupting global effects, types of operation, or noble safety ground, linking academic discussions about the amount of change of public policy bills, global movements outside the university. Swandy 2030 claims promote the need for people to be aware of the imperial characteristics of the world itself, promoting a struggle. Study should not be understood among academics or those plenty of interest outside academic to learn about global commodity chains. These topics are not percent off the discussion to connect process of people around the world, movements, educate the public by applying to the political economic goal, global commodity chains, support to movement to reform theoretically and to make the research available to marginalized communities to trade two-way conversations be developed to find good examples, never stop happens to unrest, mass protests. Why? The international law, there are social things, we have anything to learn from each other. Embassy in Brazil, commies in Venezuela, fear of fact, arguments, Argentina, peasant movement in India. We need to create local production distribution, link the means to break from global change into dirty man, stop being linked to imperial economy. We have to bring our commitment to teaching and research. Warning. One, uncertainty over U.S. carbon market signals triggers a global wave of politicized finance into austerity forms. IFI is motivated to de-risk and declassify assets, maximize global inequality, tax havens, expansion, financial subordination. France, McDelly, 24 global self-funded pressure into a U.S. model. IFI is into the financial market sample, factors borrowing U.S. also university market prices, and financial investments in the North Wall Street, and the zero joint de-risking partnerships and green development models, funding financial supports, new assets, costs, and multilateral development banks, and influence positive vulnerability balance sheet, the defense, liquidity, child, and mining companies all increase vulnerabilities in market-based financial reliance on derivatives to agree uncertainty, the price setting, and increase subordination, reduce policy dependencies, increasing closure capital. Full price of profit area for rich channels and taxing the 1% increase in natural research was 0.2, 2% decline in current account value can easily shot to global financial dependency deficit to unsustainable debt crisis makes economic crisis, geopolitical instability, ecological devastation, devil extinction decide at all 23 debt crisis results 2 decades, long 2 decades, investment inflation after away trade so down the pandemic forces taking the war trusted there is no west of the China so more causes starting to get them even further and debt judgment not going to be repaid the crisis destroy the economy this is going to collapse sanctions then tweaks energy prices food prices and military finance the major political realignment to repay these debt countries going to serve the force physically to degrade the land supply the people to degrade the ecosystem going to collapse races making survival 2 climate model cement practical thinking that motivates policies by fiat those predictions fail cement distraction accordingly implementation of a possible solution that permits perfect sustainability so equal to all 21 distracted logic different climate models not modeling payment not paying really going to predict the future those who are against the triggers assert that images in the future not even forecast computer based models and integration of possible futures however despite those much repeated caveats they easy to repeat the opposite by answers company representations of the future carbon ground remove option options models say that large amount of needed to justify current setting by enacting the IAMS showed the total responsible lungs are lines and imagine that a future technology that relies massive where models created massive defense policy community reaching for the defense violence shows that effects are not possible or the card not possible 3 price signals cancel form and reasonable 20 comments and market increases scope and interconnected tech and regular business model life lock into design cities that develop alongside automobile and tire and climate time regulations social technical system produce shift the price of transition common sense for city plans to develop under change current trajectory to be from BAU and even Sweden $140 down from the station living from the lock and avoid dead end path mark the card at dead end path and I'll do one more. Claims does nothing. Lewis, 20 million CO2 taxes at $450 per ton, holding for 0.1% degree of warming, 1 centimeter of the other price, according to the EPA model, would have no defensive environmental conditions of trade. It doesn't solve war. Brooks 24, individual studies reporting opportunity of commerce that promotes visa theory, individual studies that systemic of bigger research of the connection trend, the 57 examined, just 16 part of the protected trade. You have promote trade relationships, so many actions not be boiled down to anything that the fact financial finds is murky. Literature not show good investors tweets 8 to 4 studies, 1 of all say well, in fact, no. EU aligns back 0 terminal back to 8, and then without sanction because burnout B, recessions coming now, 0, 8 code EU relations don't often see they make China come more like the geopolitical contention, technology is overhyped, and no modeling, so basically 24 and then developing world this on bench 1. Why developing world major culprit in India and Indonesia South Africa commerce signals not working lack of competitive markets. On bench 1, Strafisa 24 is marked at lack of competitive markets.
You said which card?
Stravistov 24.
Done.
On the last card on bench 1.
Thank you.
Alright. You ready?
Yeah.
The alternative, is it conditional?
Sam? Yeah, the alternative.
Can it result in the plan?
No, will not
Okay.
result in the
Logical resistance, how does it reduce emissions?
Sam, do you want to take it?
Sure. We would say that logistical resistance reduces emissions by creating democratic relationships in the economy that one streamline capitalism out of its collapse and its worst excesses, and
Okay.
by creating.
How do you create democratic relationships to the economy?
The Volcker's evidence says that by leveraging the power that workers have over vulnerable logistical nodes in capital, for example, nodes of supply chain distribution, can essentially leverage successful demands over.
Okay. What is leveraging? What is
supply
leveraging supply chain distribution? What does that mean?
It means that in the status quo, workers have an incredibly substantial and meaningful power over capitalist economic systems that is currently not recognized.
What would they do?
Or
What would they do?
by capitalist economic systems.
What would they do?
We
What do
think
workers do?
The Volcker's evidence isolates forms of direct action, for example, against oil transport, nuclear waste transports, pipelines.
Nuclear
ports.
waste transport? What do you do about that?
We think that we should utilize forms of direct action to stop those
What
transfers.
is that?
So that they're not.
So what, like,
it
do
means
you
that they're
blow
not-
up nuclear, like, facilities?
No, it means that toxic nuclear waste isn't dumped on indigenous land.
How do workers stop those things?
We think we can use forms of direct action, like literally
Things like transport, i.e. disrupting the transport flows in the first place, means it cannot
Disrupt
be dumped on indigenous
transport
land.
flows. How is that?
Our argument is that capital appears invincible in the status
So,
quo.
so you fiat workers in the United States go into the streets
Fiat
and
isn't
like
the word
stop.
that we use. We are defending the intensification and practice of a political methodology and a praxis.
Okay.
Things like
so-
direct
so-
action,
so
things
what-
like strikes can be
I
incredibly
guess
effective. Without the workers,
how
they
does,
literally cannot do
how does that reduce emissions globally in like other countries like India and China?
Well, the Sawandi evidence makes the connection between one, the affirmative research project, and how linking public discussions in academic and versus public settings around forms of logisticality and longitudinal resistance can create research practices that make more ethical.
What does that
advocates
What does
of
that mean for
logisticality.
India like polluting and like China?
It means that the affirmative method and research method creates and fosters transnational movements against forms of economic collapse, because the entire point of the One NC's analytic is that it's not just about a single port or a
The
single
impact card
node,
to the
a personal
K,
node, is that
the
interconnection
impact card to the K, all of your
global
links
scale
are about how like extractivism now, like green pledges of net zero have not materialized. You have then read an impact card about how that competition will result in nuclear war. I guess like what is the scenario?
I would
Why
definitely
hasn't it
not
resulted in
characterize
nuclear war?
all of our links as about extraction happening now. It's many different forms of extraction, specifically the Brand and Weissen evidence and the Rio Francos evidence talk about how the affirmative, i.e. proven by cross-ex, the affirmative will be channeled into geopolitical competition, i.e. we try to lock China out of markets, and specifically it's used to securitize, i.e. you can now use to securitize the onshore.
Do you think the
integrate into those
existing
processes.
tariffs don't lock China out of the market now?
We think that if that's true, you don't have an AF, but also.
Well, no, that just means it's trying.
Your inherency of the One AC
No.
is that China is going to dominate green supply chain markets now, absent the app. That's your inherency.
Also, we think that that's not the right question. The question is just uniqueness, i.e. it's rejecting the 1AC's research assumptions towards China in the first place, and the
So this is
alternative provides
this
uniqueness
is
for
going to
that.
be affirmative debate. That's fine.
Are y'all ready?
Yes.
Okay.
ADT.
I'm gonna go into the.
Go ahead and send it now though, because it's taken a really long time for,
Will do.
I didn't get that till the last 2 minutes.
Actually, let me take 1 second.
Eight 13.
8:10. Sorry. needs a doc. All right. The order is warming, trade, the K. Everyone good? All right. Drop that climate change causes extinction from tipping points and rising temperatures. Drop that climate wars cause extinction from resource shortages that go nuclear. And drop that ocean acidification causes extinction because the oceans cannot produce more oxygen, which means that we literally cannot breathe. Now the finance turn group it. DAs require uniqueness, a link, internal link, and an impact. Macalester has not read a complete argument, so when the block makes one, the 1AR gets new answers. Case turns the DAA. Climate disruptions, disasters, pollution, and disease will have broad economic effects, which collapses supply chains. And B, protectionism, trade wars over diverging climate policies cause global economic decline. That's Kearns, Bowens, and Bouchard. And climate regulations are inevitable. The majority of global economies will apply CBAMs, and individual states thump the link. That's the Rourke evidence. And Trump thumps financial stability. Fox 1110 Trump will result in inflation, tariffs, and deportation. Lower taxes, companies pass cost to consumers. Executives are already signaling this. We're set to raise prices. And Trump's promise likely to boost inflation and shocking the labor market. A shortage of labor force companies to raise wages, which in turn raises prices. Lower tax rates are stimulative with price rising. Inflation is guaranteed an inflationary shock bigger than anything else you could do. The Fed start hiking interest rates again. The market is signaling this. Inflation expectations have jumped, and no tax havens. The plan's BCA stops offshoring by placing a tax on imports. That's the Tampa evidence, and the transition is inevitable. Renewables will overtake fossil fuels, but it'll be too late. They have not read a link about carbon pricing. The plan is not climate financing, and the plan solves A, debt. The tax generates billions in revenue, which adds debt cushions, and B, deflationary empirics. Evidence confirms in Mosner 22 study carbon tax affects inflation and suggests higher carbon tax rates not led to large increases. Use of carbon pricing to speed up the necessary transition. Net zero emissions not held back by concerns about inflationary effects, and no debt internal to global markets are insulated. Adrian has held 24 global interest rates have gone on a roller coaster. Our climbing emerging market economies, however, saw milder rate moves. Average sensitivity to interest rates declined by 2/3 due to divergence of monetary policy challenges economic lit that show large spillover. Emerging markets have been insulated. There are signs of resilience during volatility. Emerging markets spent years improving policy firms build additional reserves. Investors become more reducing reliance on foreign capital. Emerging markets enhance central bank independence, and there's no impact to debt groupment. 24 debt is a political problem. Our economy is huge. Debt is unprecedented. It's the same as it was in World War II. It's lower than Japan and Britain's debt ratio. In none of these cases was there anything resembling a debt crisis. Every crisis involved in a country that borrows someone else's currency. Many don't believe that will cause a financial implosion. Mark the card at implosion. Now their next argument was that fiat is magical, thinking the card is about carbon removal. Not the app doesn't say anything about fiat. It's just about extractivism, but it's about the extractivism from CCS, which does not apply to the app. The next argument was that pricing fails the Rosenblum evidence. The pricing solves our work in Nystrom evidence model. Model the text taking into account all the existing regulations and hurdles that their evidence cites. The next argument was that the plan solves nothing. The Lewis evidence rejected. They falsely claim EPA modeling when the data actually comes from the Heritage Energy Model from the Heritage Foundation, which are known climate denialists. I'm inserting the relevant footnote, and here's where it leads to Turner and Lourdes. 19, we use the Heritage Energy Model implemented in economy wide carbon tax, and now the modeling fails argument. The warrant in this argument is that they do not have carbon markets set up. The plan obviously solves that. The trade advantage. Yes, trade prevents war. Decoupling produces polarization and cross-border conflict, weaken anti-war norms, and reduce capacity to confront threats, fueling nationalism, which is a major contributor to conflict. A world without free trade erodes economic constraints on military aggression by lowering the cost. That's Oppenheimer. We're not going for the impact filter, so that doesn't matter. The K. One framework way, the plan links must be unique, advocacies must be material, functionally competitive, and fiat the same scope of the app. Mooting 9 minutes of the 1EC in favor of an academic vacuum, collapses fairness, distracts from clash, and eliminates logical incentives for nuanced research. 2, filter it through the lens of reasonability. The NEG gets everything they've read in the 1EC, and we get to weigh the consequences of the plan against their links. That's the only way to preserve a unique role for both the app and the NEG. And the NEG 3 extinction outweighs. It's the only irreversible impact of 4 floating picks, and big alts are a voting issue. They're limitless, unpredictable, and make clash impossible. 5, condo is a voting issue. It causes 2EC strat skew and distorts research, which makes debate impossible. Dispo solves no perms, no kicks. Now the permutation perm do both solves all of their offense because it reduces emissions in the short term and builds a long-term sustainable future. Fox 23 alternative is a pragmatic approach that acknowledges that a market economy may facilitate emissions reductions. This pragmatism shifts the emphasis towards efforts to rapidly transition to renewable energy. This strategy aims to reduce the ecological impact and inequalities of capitalism by scaling back ecologically destructive or unnecessary production, improving well-being, and using fiscal policy to reduce inequalities globally. Such an approach is politically achievable and incremental. It encourages collaborations between citizens, universities, companies, and government agencies to work with policymakers towards internationally shared and achievable program, the unfettered dynamic of capitalist production markets can be tempered while ideologies promoting globalization and neoliberalization are replaced with a more managed approach to economic development. Now the trade link, the plan solves it because it results in harmonization. That's when you see Hillman, Tampa, and Work, which is net better for emerging economies. And yes, decoupling Wayne et al. 24 large differences in decoupling of countries under different emissions accounting. A consumption-based perspective is important to prevent carbon leakage and to achieve global decoupling. High-income countries demonstrate better outcomes in decoupling. Advanced infrastructure and stringent environmental policies facilitate reductions of carbon footprint. Decoupling might be achieved at the expense of outsourcing of carbon-intensive production to lower-income countries. Decoupling is less a result of comprehensive sustainable practices and more a consequence of transferring pollution abroad. Global decoupling effort will require countries to address emissions embedded in consumption. Emerging countries are caught in a development trajectory that emphasizes industrial growth relying on carbon economic benefits of maintaining carbon outweigh immediate incentives for investing in clean tech. Without aid and tech, it is unlikely that countries will be able to implement changes to reduce emissions. Emissions mark the card at emissions. Now the FEFR link, the argument above answers it because it says that the alternative would be worse because it results in offshoring that materially destroys the environments in other countries for the sake of the United States, which is something that the plan stops via the BCA. Now the pricing link, the plan solves warming by accounting for market externalities. Rebuttal 24, the global capitalist model is not the problem only by leveraging the capitalist structure. Can we solve the effects of climate change? No other model could come close to the efficiency of capitalism and finding effective solutions. Key barometers, profit, growth. If there are costs that the firm is not including the role of the government is to develop a corrective because carbon emissions are measurable. There is a concrete way of assessing their costs. We can effectively internalize these costs through a carbon tax to maximize profits. Firms will innovate and compete to produce less carbon. The power of the capitalist model is now unleashed to lower emissions. Capitalism has become a scapegoat, but it is well within our power to harness capitalism for a global good. Now the value chain link is a question of AFF solvency. We have made arguments about decarbonization being good and global follow-on, which resolves this link because it's about trade tensions between the U.S. and China. The AFF takes a stance that while those tensions are likely inevitable and coming in the status quo, the plan can harness those tensions for global decarbonization and eventually fold China into the mix of global decarbonization through the border adjustment. Now, broadly, the theme of their link arguments is about renewables and extractivism. One, no renewables link meets our framework because they have dropped that the transition is inevitable. That's when you see Whole House. And two, renewable mining has an endpoint. Fossil fuels are ceaseless. Nushatelli, 22 fossil fuels require more mining. The world mines 8 billion tons of coal every year. The transition will require 3.5 billion total over the next 3 decades. Once a turbine or solar panel is constructed, no further mining is needed. Their fuel is provided by nature. Fossil fuels require ceaseless mining to obtain no new fuel. Now the alternative, it's terrible. One, supply chain disruptions cause global war. Martin 21 impacts supply chain disruption as shortages, inflation, waiting import, supply chain disruptions cause economic disruption and key commodity shortages which drive aggressive national behavior and international stability. Shortages spill into adjacent sectors. Whole economies feel the impact. The impact on vulnerable populations may be dire. Supply chain disruptions affect generic drugs, energy costs of living, and the provision of basic needs. This can create instability, promoting conditions for conflict between and within nations as affluent nations try to forcefully safeguard what they have gained. Actors facing shortages promote international instability. Shortages can make needs for national government to act more dire. Nations have gone to war over resource shortages to secure key markets, and the explicit premise in World War II and II, the protest, the alternative calls for failure. Yosef, 21 climate activism not led to significant divestment from fossil fuels or other environmentally damaging industries. Unfortunate reason none of the conditions are met to a sufficient change in behavior. Banks, the optic of their investments are not sufficiently unambiguous. International climate policies have created a linear regulatory environment. Discrepancies between countries' regulations are not yet strict enough to elicit behavioral changes. Means that climate activism towards financial institutions will not prove effective on its own. And 3, ecotage is statistically ineffective. Gunderson et al. 23, poverty destruction and ineffective means include movements that use physical sabotage as the destruction of infrastructure. Relevant to the question of whether destroying fossil fuel infrastructure and non-violent resistance campaigns nearly twice as likely to achieve success as violent counterparts. Climate contemporary U.S. is not a hospitable context for effective climate change. Relative effectiveness. Violent movements proceed to gain participants need to create a mass climate movement rather than by past organizing via climate change. Environmentalists as conservative propaganda are cast as culture warriors. Effectively transition away will require coordination and legitimacy of the state to act. Goal should be to build popular support of mass-based sabotage of feed into culture while solidifying existing alliances, redirecting energies away from organization building and coalition work. Now I will go back to the FEFR link. The plan is the only way to take meaningful action while preventing offshoring to developing countries. Pomerleau 25. Robert McCarr argues his history of Western investment in developing countries favoring extractive and polluting industries will make a border adjustment hypocritical, but history cannot be separated from the fact that environmental standards in the West had no border adjustment, such that producers could shift production to countries with less stringent environmental standards. Even as air quality in the West improved, if the U.S. were to enact a carbon tax without a border adjustment, it would risk incentivizing shifting carbon production to developing countries and creating a risk of stranded assets. A border adjustment is not punitive. It's a tax policy that equals the tax burden on imported goods and domestically produced goods. Clean infrastructure in developing countries would be complemented by a well-designed border adjustment. Under a carbon tax, serious climate mitigation requires putting a price on carbon.
Are you open for cross?
Yep.
First, I'd like to start on the finance. This the Krugman. Actually, first I want to ask, normally it's the plan, the money goes into U.S. coffers, basically, correct?
Yes.
Okay, Krugman is about U.S. debt. The DISAD is about global South debts. U.S. has one of the world's largest economy. Those countries do not. I'm confused why this applies to those countries' debt crisis.
The Krugman evidence says that those debt crises never escalated because
No,
they.
the Krugman evidence says the U.S. debt crisis is not a risk. It says that because we have such a large economy, I'm confused why that applies.
Right.
to
Your
those
impact
countries.
part about countries in the global south. Our Krugman evidence says that countries like Venezuela and Argentina, Morocco, when they had debt crisis, that never escalated because they don't have nuclear weapons. Like you did not get to an extinction impact in the 1 and C. The only scenario you could is if you read an impact to the U.S. debt crisis, but our Krugman evidence answers that too.
We didn't read to impact U.S. debt. That's okay.
Exactly.
The critique. Yeah, framework. How do you determine what is a unique link to the plan?
Not happening in the status quo.
Not happening. All right. Yeah, that's okay. The permutation do both. Reduces emissions in the short term. If we win the plan reinvestment supply chains, how does it reduce those emissions via the Fox evidence?
Well, we've made arguments that investing in trade is key to reducing global emissions because it allows the flow of clean energy technology. So that would be a debate about solvency that we think we're more
the
likely
flow
to
of green energy technologies. 1AC has, for pretty much most of the EU scenario, has talked about how China is currently trying to send out those flow of green technologies. 1AC Cross has explicitly said you do onshoring to the U.S. I'm confused how you solve that when you have reverted to onshoring.
So
Explicit 1AC Cross.
our argument has always been that tariffs are inevitable. China's clean energy is already tariffed in the status quo. Trump is likely to put much more tariffs on China in the status quo as well.
Okay,
the border
so Trump is
adjustment
about to put a bunch
makes
of...
those tariffs more effective in the sense of
Why? Why does it make them more effective? Why is China
if you
incentivized
would
to
let me
follow
finish
a
a
US
sentence,
lead?
I could maybe get to an answer. Okay, so our evidence says that the tariffs combined with the plan would be more effective in producing decarbonization because it would incentivize China to reduce production, which would get them back into the market post border
Okay,
adjustment.
why do they get back in the market if we have a bunch of other tariffs on them post-plan that are not just climate?
The Rapier evidence says that a border adjustment would reduce the impact of those tariffs and prompt more cooperation.
What evidence do you have that the Trump tariffs are only about climate change? That your evidence, the Rapier evidence just says that Trump is putting a bunch of tariffs, which would mean that because the U.S. domestic stuff is clean, means
Okay,
that it would
yes,
be good for
obviously all of
decarbonization.
Trump's tariffs are not about climate change, but the Rapier evidence is in the context of all the tariffs that Trump is going to try to put on China when he takes office.
Okay, where does it say
believe
that it would
that's
increase cooperation with China? I'm confused why China becoming more clean gets around those Trump tariffs.
the bottom of the evidence that says that that a border adjustment would resolve many of the issues. I don't have the exact part in front of me, so I'm just like spitballing, but it says that a border adjustment would resolve many of the issues with Trump tariffs and that managing trade tensions is key to the success of a clean energy economy.
10 minutes.
Are you taking a second?
You didn't read Pocket. You did not read
No,
Pocket.
not quite.
somebody get Christmas. Yeah, he's tiny.
It's gonna be the case straight down. Henry, my obligatory check with you that you're good. Hear me? Awesome. Sweet. Is anybody not ready? Wow, that's really weird. The K turns not waste the case. Green nationalism constitutes a security, sustainability nexus which channels carbon pricing into rising fashion, the great power competition, and neoliberal extractivism at risk of nuclear escalation. Their miscal construction, structure, triad, framing is wrong, evidence, systems, analysis, and anything else ignores existing interdependencies between political production and material discursive networks. Uniqueness is arbitrary. Specifically on this topic, since all solvency requires digital material supply chain infrastructure to function, which Short's case they've conceded to presumption arguments under the one is one, the plan facilitates corporate capture, which zeroes any benefits to solvency and precludes efficiency, which takes out the sustainability debate, and obviously means they can't solve warring. Two, competition fractures the international order, which makes hidden leakage on the supply chain inevitable, which takes out both advantages, both negative for logistical sabotage and solves every terminal impact because it not only disentangles the logic of fossil fuel abolition from medical decarbonization, but empirically reconstitutes carbon channels towards redistributive welfare, which means only we have a strategy to retool the state, so any risk of a trade-off with the firm means that triad terminally flips NEG independently, political reaction trigger green stagflation, political backlash, demand crunches and technical limits cause fossil fascism, and eradicate the ability for capitalism to restructure itself. Michael, 21 obstacles to political economic crisis, leading the transition to backlash, the available energy for the rest of the world. We would as a higher sort of energy and mineral bottlenecks, which trigger price spikes and inflation, declining capital's ability to restructure to a great crisis, which creates like crisis with great dimensional adjustment, backlash, and regarding fascism framework. Our interpretation should evaluate the one and see advantages through value chains analysis. No Afro-Naked uniqueness claim is ever isolated, and every argument and debate shares one global interconnected uniqueness argument, which means if we win that logistical privatization politically flips the one and see inherency claims, then triad flips negative two standards. First is value capture, supply chain incorporation magnifies all forms of ecological destruction while invisibilizing financial networks that reinforce the dominance of fossil fuels, dirty lending, and rising prices in the global south, which creates global immensuration, linear impact chains shape and affect one another, which means if we win a competing analysis of the direction of this world, then all of our disheads and framework offense turn the aft because we've won that the front end implementation of the plan is overdetermined by a politicized back end supply chain regime that turns case limiting debates to market options, guarantees contradictory consequences, and manufactured consent. Your drill 21. There's no religion between government and society. The agenda moves in opposite direction. The societal demands open debate as long as the law is the fault of parameters of control, public opinion, manufacturing, consent structures, legal organizations, laws. Debates only within parameters of the interest that makes anything in the market options utopian corporate media is produced in market context and commanding structures of society. Second is regulatory circumvention. It caps implementation. Normal means requires political firestorms amongst private actors, which caps implementation. Union slips NEG, private controversies, and political contestation of long-term political consequences that contravene expected implementation across multilateral institutions. Camp brackets. 23. Policies face opposition from private interests and away from public private liquidity and revolving phenomena makes dependence of the state upon private interests with international private actors issue compliance while regulatory authorities of global value chain spending within the market must show more awareness of the risk of dominance of the public plan of spending and market perpetuation is limited. Explanatory dynamics cannot be constrained. We solve fairness. It's a question of how, not what ground to evaluate. Links are to the plan which obviously solves our offense, which is the benefit of more accurate policy analysis because we obviously know that forms of digitalization like algorithmic economics and cloud streaming are under theorized and both debate in civil society. Framework to point 3 is not responsive because we also have extinction impacts. The alternative is not a pick. That was clarified in cross-section. No vague alt 1, no link. The alternative isn't vague. That was cross-section and below 2 reasonability. Vagueness is arbitrary and impossible to define. 3 framework. Evidence of the genuine evidence proof that elites control policy debates, which means that alternative political methods are always framed as vague. Condo, counter-interrupt, we only just need one, which checks it needs one logic. Turns class to own world negatives to disprove the desirability of one to see their contrived intro kills predictability and real world advocates must defend their arguments in any context. 2 neg flex the negs reactive only condo outcomes research and prep deficits 2 AC add-on and speaking first and last 3 debaters so risk averse condo provides neg fallback options to test new offense which skid clash 4 not a voter they have to prove made debate impossible otherwise default to reasonability 5 strat attempts use are inevitable with dissents and T. The permutation 1 severs the use of scope supply chains and their frames of image analysis means it incoherent and a reason to reject makes the AFF moving target which checks education and fairness to co-op with the imperial state fails schedulers. 22 the only way we know that our governments are doing is through legal direct action first as the theoretical second copy realistic to agreeing with the industry 4 foundation made of under micro rights and environmental justice regionally analyzing cultivating software to government making sure that routine reform oriented working with the CIA government risk criminalizing geoscience academics attempts to defend the police response to your gut transition to green capitalism and geos corporations on every hand as a result of this project the counterproductive corporations are prime beneficiaries legitimizing and extracting dividing populations is a clear set of countersources leading as an A3 rebalancing link and turn unilateral action fails and the plan triggers WCO controversies that fuel great power antagonism price gouging and domestic union busting turns every trade internal and Pakistani 21 absent global sovereign there's no way to compel action to hope that the US and EU China will compete clean energy dollars union busting different policy realize methodological nationalism threatening overly political nationalism increasing antagonism with the US and China policy does little to reduce emissions also face political obstacles terrorist propensity scan objecting for the DFCD the we reflect down the supply chain country to face with high power and cost 4 links are dishead they disprove the desirability of the firm and the plan because their impact turn into consequences of the one I see which answers the double bind the Fox evidence the finance dishead links prove the
government abuses fiscal policy to increase inequalities globally, so they don't even meet their own burden in their evidence. The link debate, you should frame the link debate through supply chain sustainability. The 2C overview has already argued the first link, which is that the 1AC fuels the expansion of digitalized supply chain regulation to green extraction and transition, which means data governance turns the AFF enforcement, reproduces forms of policing, land tenure expropriation, and mass energy consumption efficient loops that trade off with the permutation because it destroys environmental activism while toxifying the global south. 5 internal links in the 1AC to the Rio Franco's evidence, which was conceded that prove they get vectored into eco-nationalism against China, independently disproves their modeling claims because China obviously escalates, not cooperates. In response to the AFF 1, the 1AC Jane evidence isolates preventing Chinese supply chain domination as a reason to do the AFF 1AC Jane, pointing forward failure could accelerate global fragmentation of clean energy markets with China dominating supply chains. 2, politicians are primed to use the plan to escalate green nationalism and protectionism. Now 1AC O'Sullivan net zero can make the global trading system more resilient. Political leaders recognize the urgency of fighting climate change, but they also face imperatives to make supply chains more resilient and reduce dependency on China. Tightening use restrictions on Chinese exports continues, but as emphasized Biden's preference for policy that does not advantage the countries whose companies produce low carbon and import goods, not the China, the United States, and countries seeking to friendshore manufacturing should widen their circles. Only a small number of advocacies. A list that includes China should be excluded. 3, isolates China as a rising target, as a rising threat. Stokes 20, the United States and Europe face challenges that threaten their way of life of rising China. 4, the 1AC says that Trump's BCA is good for making China less competitive. Doesn't say they solve trade, but prevents trade war from conflicting with solving warming rapier. Eliminate increasing costs of Chinese products. Tariffs could reduce demand for high carbon imports. However, the effectiveness of the strategy hinges on the U.S.'s ability to ramp up domestic production and supply chains border. Carbon adjustment mechanisms target China to transition away, making its export less competitive in the global market. Trade tensions could counteract these benefits. Tariffs mitigate climate change. 5, economic globalization is producing escalating regimes of economic conflict, specifically vectored against China, not cooperation. Proves green nationalism. Oppenheimer 21, instead of interdependence, pushing states with collaboration. States are exploiting interdependence to inflict harm on adversaries. Interaction produces friction and escalating trade disputes. Trade and investments friction with China is the most obvious example, escalated by President Trump in trade and the currency war. I'll do the rest of the link debate at the bottom, but I have time, but this is enough because it was literally conceded. The sustainability debate, it terminally goes negative. It's not responsive, and the plane is on its own. Flip sustainability and triggers or impacts scenarios on the criticism. 1, illicit finance and regulatory capture. Flip cap good pleasure. 23, illicit finance flows produce inequality, secrecy to contribute to disintegration. Anonymous companies tactic money laundering, trade manipulation. Handle have a global worker affairs. Single element of the secrecy system is in benefiting the board of direction of capitalism has a disastrous long-term profitability. Lack of accountability is dangerous to capitalism. Regulations have been rolled back, creating shadow banking, regulatory capture, global financial stability means keeping the poor country foreign rich country. 2, commodity chains drive fictitious capital, asset bubbles, and great power miscalc and food. And problem 21, computational use of monopoly, multinational corporations, coordinated value chains. Various governance models, multinational corporations compromise use of new technology, but also control marketing. Financial supervision will become more difficult. Vulnerabilities of financial system will create finance capital expand efficient assets. CEO buybacks, stocks, and trigger to use world economy coaxes against the development of virtual economy. Value depends on the expansion of asset bubbles. Institutions rely on financial innovations. Global South workforces could be for basic living incomes. Cut the card at basic living incomes. No decoupling. Standard 24 decouplings, wishful thinking, sufficient scale of the economy, growth, following consumption also grows. Historical tendencies, sustaining growth of 2% with necessary reduction of emission by 10% every year. The solution is giving up on growth is the economy made under capitalism, which trying to raise productivity makes pressure key expanding, maintaining employment. Capitalism cannot expand the productivity trap, improving efficiency of energy has already been essential purpose of industrial sector. Relative decoupling is proceeding. The global South to reverse the worldwide emissions have decreased here 50% with the relative decoupling. Like paradoxical decoupling remains a dream. Emissions in the U.S. are rising. Apparent decoupling is emission peaking is placed to the global South with factor in carbon and importing. Relative decoupling decreases efficiency. An optimization of limits for growth of fossil fuel consumption are inextricably linked. Renewable energies and consumer of fossil fuels. New technologies improve efficiency. They decrease the boomerang effects of increased consumption. Even if relative decoupling from one area, the capital ends up being applied to other bits that use more energy. Rendering gains efficient. Rendering gains efficient. The alternative debate. Though negative for logistical resistance, it renders supply chains inoperable via direct action against nuclear waste. Oil pipelines and ports to create new complexes of worker class solidarity across choke points of capital, which streamlines collapse into transitionary workers' cooperatives and constrains capitalism more sexist. His Volcker says that denaturalizes supply chains and exposes capitalist precarity by making dependencies and entanglements visible, which frees out their solvency deficits because they're based on liberal common sense politics. We prove it is false. It solves both advantages. Only an economy not mediated by endless profit can respect fundamental planetary boundaries and dealing from international competition that uses trade as a tool of geopolitical antagonism. Research practices outweigh that. Swandi, she says, equipping ourselves to elucidate commodity chain processes for the public is a form of resistance that promotes international solidarity with groups like the MST in Brazil or peasant movements in India to create local production and distribution linkages that sever ties to the imperialist world economy, which amplifies broader transitionary organizing, which produces a soft landing and constrains the worst excesses of capital, means a 1% risk of trade-off, means the trade-off flips neg, the Martin evidence. It links turns the impact supply chain, subsume the AFF into eco-anxiety and privatized backlash, which causes protectionism for green nationalism and rising fascism. But 1 proves the terminal impact of Rio Franco, says that econ disruptions spill over to national security and cause war, which proves that U.S. eco-nationalism vectored against China causes escalation. 2 says disruptions in one area spill over to the entire economy. It proves our arguments about interconnection and proves that disruptions spill over on the all. 3 says nations go to war over resources, even with interdependence, which means if they can't win, that capitalism solves war. 4 no link assumes disruptive foreign market access, not direct action. No scenario flash out. 5 reject Martin, the director of the National Security Supply Chain Institute, which proves a vested interest in sustaining status quo supply chains. The Palmer, go back up, go to the Palmer lower evidence. It's not responsive. 1 if effort impact terms CBAMs and 2 discard says that a carbon tax without a border. It's about a carbon tax without a border adjustment, which is offshoring, not the alternative. The Yosef evidence is about generic protests without specific or evidence in the context of our method because they're vectored towards supply chain. The nodes of liquidity in supply chains. The Gunderson evidence is just about private property destruction broadly. Volcker says that was vectored against nodes of liquidity. It succeeds, which is a key difference. They haven't vectored. It also cites a channel within Steffen's study, which is about civil wars and government overthrows, which is not our method. No crackdown empirics disprove logistical resistance against carbon channels. Houthi rebels in 2019 attacking Saudi refineries with plastic drones and taking over 7% of the global oil supply in one day, or Iraqi resistance against U.S. occupation that repelled oil investment by successfully attacking pipelines over 200 times. 2 turns case, not the all proves. Supply chains are determined by a fascist military dictatorship, which amplifies only arguments about backlash and green transition. Also, the military and police require supply chains to function. I'm going to go back up to the link debate. Free trade in a world of inter-imperial rivalries merely to economic bipolarity. Every single study in the AFF attributes fundamental trends in global inequality. That's Kennedy says global inequality rising and metrics for poverty fail to implicate regular occurrences of wars, coups, massacres, and riots mass under civilizationist rhetoric that then blames developing nations for collapse of plan directly causes ceases development capacity, which demonstrates why this argument is true, but also doesn't assume cyclical periods of crisis of capitalism, which turns trade into a series of blocks instead of a unified network that casts conflict or harmonizes economic systems, which proves that capitalism inevitably fractures trade and generates regional blocks, which is demonstrated by the piece of evidence below that is specific to clean policy that unfortunately I will not have time to read, but is really good. I'm open for questions. Well, if you have time, it's pretty short, honestly. Yeah, I'm good.
Henry, you can hear me, all right?
I'll mute my.
I think that was a yes. Okay, you good?
Yeah.
All right, framework. How do the judges evaluate the debate if we win that the plan solves our impacts and you win the links?
We think that the judges can use an offense-defense paradigm to establish that. The point of our, which is I think very similar to your interpretation, I don't think our framework offense differs in terms of like how the judge evaluates offense itself. We are making an argument about uniqueness arguments in debate and how a linear form of scenario analysis precludes effective scenario planning, especially in the context of an increasingly interconnected and algorithmically driven economy, which means that feedback loops and contributing effects are inevitable results of the plan. We think that your scenario analysis that takes those things, for example, the supply chain regime as neutral, means that the affirmative inevitably results in contravened expectations and feedback loops that turn all of your advantages and means that the plan results in the links and not the advantages.
What does it mean to evaluate the plan through value chains?
Yeah, we think that the arguments that we have made about the direction of inherency and uniqueness control the scope and direction of 1AC internal links. And we think that we think that we need to implicate and take into account the way in which nonlinear both impacts like warming and nonlinear economic processes like the supply chain is key to any form of accurate scenario analysis to actually have a correct understanding of how forms of political projects like the 1AC are actually realized. We have read arguments about how, for example, fiscal incentives and financial actors globally use things like the plan to increase forms of circumvention, algorithmic governance, datafication, increase vector nationalism against China, etc.
I have another question. Yeah, the Pfeffer link with the Pomerleau answer, you've like asserted that Pomerleau is not responsive. The link evidence that you've read is about how, you know, the history of climate policies and how border adjustments operate. Pomerleau has responded to this by saying that because of history, we need to do border adjustments to prevent further offshoring away from environmental regulations.
That's not the critique of CBAMs that Pfeffer says. The Pfeffer evidence says that CBAMs lock vulnerable global south countries like Senegal out of key markets, which increases global poverty and austerity. The Pfeffer evidence also says that the incomes from a CBAM will be used to support the transition of global north firms as opposed to global south firms, which amplifies global economic inequalities.
Okay.
So like we have been.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The alternative, like not our sabotage, why?
Well, you've read arguments about like just like property destruction generally, and like that is just not the alternative. We think that forms of worker direct action generated in like specific parts of the capitalist economy, not just broadly, are key to solve our impacts. The Folkers evidence is incredibly specific about this. Only we have read on-point evidence about our method. We think that when workers utilize forms of direct action, what Folkers calls nodes of liquidity, or where capital is incredibly concentrated, means that they have incredibly meaningful and substantial and effective leverage over forms of supply chains. For example, Amazon distribution centers, ports. We all saw a port strike about a month ago that in 3 days achieved all of their demands, because when workers center at points that are key to broader supply chains, they have incredibly effective leverage over the economy as a whole, which is the argument we're making about interconnectedness, which you have not responded to.
Jared Staff.
Orders advantage one next to.
Can you wait my computer?
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
Is there a doc?
Yeah, it's already been sent. I mean, the doc's been sent. It's 1 to 2.
And I'm sorry, you did 1, 2 on the advantages.
Yeah, and if you manage your flow, finance will be first, and then that is property. The finance flows up. It's basically in order, but it is on top of the manager.
Okay. I see.
Yeah.
Debt crisis cause extinction and magnify every impact, even absent cascading default, inflates great power tension, triggers ecological overshoot, combination of biodiversity loss, overconsumption, deforestation, land depletion, collapse of the biosphere, and short-circuit solvency. Didn't read terminal defense of the dissent, so it's try or die. Funding climate initiatives become impossible, the economy tanks and entrenches the worst. Scenarios for corporate backlash turns to that waste the case, even absent debt, crises, financialization promotes volatile derivatives, market uncertainties, and fiscal insolvency, which reverses sustainable implementation, supercharges their impacts. They've dropped its straight transformative solvency to make it for debt payments and called the courts have destroyed the environment, economic gain, which spikes the emissions that cause biodiversity collapse regardless of plan's implementation, even if the link is independent. This adds to the cases of primes, corporate capital financializes the economy, grants weakness to our case terms, means even if we don't win the debt side, we kick the design, go for our case terms. They also net benefit to y'all. Big finance wants clean energy subsidies and carbon penalties because it promotes de-risking and convenient political firestorm because redirects finance flows to promote greenwashing, green carbonization, circumvention, good more. 21 big finance wants the state to change carbon price signals, subsidies, training, escalate, penalizing carbon finance, government spending, and directing de-risking fees, and threatening to backlash when emerges politicians' appetite, greenwashing, allow finance to enjoy green subsidies and protect profits, fiscal fundamentals, argument takes cover for green economy, financial regulations, shows the fund of politicians using them with market that validates green, classification of sustainable energy is under threat to introduce dirty activity commitments to penalizing dirty, third lending manufacturing policies are confronted with thefts, attempted making more about inflation or pressure for estimating how will allow our industrial rise. This climate disruptions, we're controlling the internal link to warming of the first means try or die. Only flips negative, doesn't trigger debt crisis. The links about investors forcing austerity measures to make up the plan rapid signal, but they don't have an internal link to it. They didn't give a warrant in the 2AC practice and doesn't determine the same reason. It begs question if you think it's debt repayments now, but green finance surge compound financial strains and precludes climate action bank forgiveness is unlikely. BWP 24. Climate finance burdens global south borrowers with debt. The pound existing financial strains have low income countries are high risk of debt. Distressed borrowing countries may unable to meet the climate action budgets are taken up by repayments. Grain conditionalities, reforms involving nations to briefing agent carbon capital. The bank oversees global north is not of adequate finance. The brink is now a new shock triggers mass defaults. Jasper 23 more than 50 states on the verge of defaulting with the good of global south as if it deal with economic shock and about that anyway that will be done for us. Take time solutions fail even absent collapse debt ratios will trigger austerity and financialization, but there's less breathing room than before the launch. 21 letters symbolic debt cancellation merely postpones payments and treatment is simply deficient and fails and predicted default to failure to materialize trade costs or nature before civil classes lending borrowed themselves debt distress. There was just enough to avoid defaults with deepening the underlying crisis. There's no reasons why trade forces those broader debt resulted. There wasn't a warrant given. Oh, they say right now for the U.S. markets. They already scale up modeling should have happened, which disproves the entirety of the case of Fox 7 Trump bumps. It's about the U.S. I'll clarify the link here. It outweighs on scope. Global South countries model U.S. market dynamics. They depend on domestic liquidity, policy decisions, investment strategies which fuel dependencies on financial disorders. And Frank McKelly, 3 internal links were dropped. First is de-risking. Invisible and investable asset concerns trigger energy and mining price surge which keep alternative supply chains. Second, blended finance. International banks contract multinational private actors to restructure asset classes to mobilize private sector globally. 3, price setting. Banks promote structural adjustment policy to insulate themselves and prevent immediate market failure triggered by unexpected demand shifts to the plans to bolt from the blue. New clean energy MBI trigger political round, the fiscal appeasement and geopolitical find fiscal coalition building respectively makes de-risking never the board. And Ron 23 the investment day. Every time the question of government rather than substituting the market weaken this revenue here the market not industry dollars already into account change to be the hawks of thereof. Robust de-risking embraces green industrial policy with green coalition with geopolitical hawks meant to go up. This policy for market continue the IRA or small reflective limited room for public green investment. Carbon pricing triggers soft therapy, special regulations triggers debt price, geopolitical management and unemployment. Good war and Ron 23 conservative fiscal hospital for prices, regulations, incentives, and trading taxes or prices to see the government market make the orbit. Lobbying group market the global price to encourage low carbon tech. Get the prices regulators with 1990 shock therapy, labelling prices, ending the credit to subsidies and tax on concessions, government hikes prices, increase of employment pricing signals reflect the geopolitical dynamic tensions between microfinancial regime deglobalization and border adjustment under Mr. Centrally trigger shock therapy to contain inflationary pressures, reinforce pricing with institutional apparatus reorienting poor countries at least responsible will be on the labs and will have that the IMF and World Bank for assistance. IMF's new climate strategy mentions conferencing 23 times the plans of green conditional lending emphasis on pricing of inherently inflationary countries. We're promising floating rates for what they got, where green currencies pushing austerity. Every case turns a new link political station proves they are unique. It means private sector circumvention is offense. In addition, justifying presumption means we don't need to win an impact of the two narcs fiscal option demonstrates unique opportunity cost of the plan with y'all real avoids. Portfolio glut ensures pricing was failed without accommodating asset managers like BlackRock Headward. 12.2 contains unique demands like BlackRock they can generate a global portfolio of renewable energy industries more geographically fragmented into global conditions like consolidation and not producing globally traded commodity renewables are trivially faded by investors developing an asset class having a fossil fuel companies that only require pricing investors. Dirty lending price signals attract shadow lenders for fossil companies under less regulatory certainty and private equity seen for dirty bonds covered. 12.2 indirect support for high government activities continue via private equity. Green repos are vulnerable to arbitrage and regular circumvention financial actions outside regulated banking. Higher relative interest rates for dirty credit like yield hungry shadow lenders, predictable cash flows, respectable credit ratings of mature oil and gas companies making most of the raising fat off balance of your station structure. Answer the tax saving signal that's not our internal link, even if it's still being priced until cause extraction from the global south, which triggers the impact renewables now is by eating. It's on the scale doesn't put a cost on investors to enter the world plan because they only are able to use the plan's pricing as political backlash, not subsidies alone. That's before that was above the plan. U.S. debt is irrelevant. That isn't in the irrelevant case that the plan solves. Not inflation disadvantage enters the most reference. There's no debt drilling because our uniqueness as markets are proving now. If the plan would upset all the things about Krugman of the U.S. It seems our link is true. Krugman 24. Every debt crisis involved a country that borrowed someone else's currency that vulnerable liquidity context. It's talking about the U.S. because we do not borrow countries the way the global south country, but they are dependent on our market to prove that there's spillover. Warming proper. 1 and 1 and C2. They functionally draw climate change inevitable. The tipping points models their authors bake in carbon capture and biofuel tech, which does not exist and can never be at scale, means internally underestimate the emission reductions requirement. All they said is that it's about CCS, which is the point. Those models are assuming CCS will come into a magical technology to reduce emissions to avoid tipping points, means it's try-rate deals, reintegration, because their affirmative will never be enough. Price signals fail. They drop the broad structural issues like regulations over renewable development and shifting. Cities and broader infrastructure cannot be reduced to shifts in price because in that last they prefer evidence of pricing of $140 carbon tax is still not going through the Lewis evidence, but Meta now some previous proofs insufficient. That's how we have 21 few studies of actual presidents as well from 1.2 reductions in countries about their worsening policies. You definitely do a tracing small reductions in taxes. Review studies on the lower half of effectiveness overall less than 0% reduction in annual studies show that they are pushing emissions of IBCs might maintain prices high $5,500 per ton to keep your levels below 1.5. I'm switching to cool gas and municipal efficiency improvement. Large cut efficiency instrument modeling is taken up by all the K trends on flow trade advantages. No, trade doesn't solve for they say polarization weak institutions, but Brooks assumes that meta review studies show most not find a correlation. One that do are producing insufficient. Prefer Brooks discussing trade wars. The icing scenario Oppenheimer is in the concept of a broader type of globalization, which artificially inflates an area and now did not in turn linked to natural level. Trump globalization can actually cause it. That the effect is broadly marginal. Means there's no impact, but only that the alternative is not better to produce it.
7. There's some cards I'm sending. I understand.
Talk.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, no, yeah. I was just...
What's happening over there?
Oh, sorry. Wait, actually, last time I was in the Zoom, it crashed, I think, so let me just... Alright, can you hear me from here? I can't join the Zoom because it crashed my computer mid-TNT, but... cards were sent. The order is Advantage 1, Advantage 2, and then the K. Alright. Y'all are good? Okay, panel's good?
Is finance at the top or warning property?
Overview, answer the turn, and then
Okay.
the defense. Alright. Cool.
His outweighs warming causes of station and conversion of system vulnerabilities surpass tipping points, burns the planet, inhibits our ability to adapt probability first because other theories like real world events, block out again, drops climate causes, resource wars that go nuclear, which independently impact us 100%. Ocean acidification also destroys our ability to have oxygen, another existential impact that is dropped now. The turn at the top, there's no impact. I dare you to stake the debate on it. You can go through the cards and they're not going to have any evidence that says a debt crisis now outside the United States will cause nuclear war. There's no impact to their countries. Their evidence list would just be subject to a debt crisis. Did not have fucking nuclear weapons. The one he just highlighted the word existential and thought that was sufficient for a war. And Macalester has failed the basic tenets of what a debate argument is. This has required uniqueness and impact, which none of their evidence outlines. And one of our was a card dumping a bunch of link evidence that is status code descriptive and does not assume an inevitable transition. There's no debt crisis. Argentina, Morocco, Venezuela, they're all relying on foreign currencies, but the reason they collapse is because of economic corruption and not having stable reserves. There's no unique evidence that says that is happening now. Now the rest of the link evidence is broadly regarded regardless because the transition is inevitable. I want to see evidence that says that energy will overtake oil by 2035, and the majority of global economies are transitioning away now. And the premise of all their link evidence on the critique also explain why the current renewable transition is extractivist and results in the subjugation of the global south, which obviously non-uniques. They're linked to the dissent because it's obviously reliant on the United States dependency now. Here's another card. IEA trying to force me into clean tech. And the person of 40 advantage to clean technologies, more cost better than conventional abuse benefits of manufacturers, intentional turn-on prices are less volatile than or providing more predictable cost by 2030. And the power of electricity overtakes all the critical transition work. And the cost of regulatory policy sort of action today. We will end up paying more tomorrow now. Regulations are also inevitable. Other countries will price emissions. EU, the CBAM 2025, China, Japan, Canada, obviously those countries would equally rely on them. That's the work evidence. It all means that investment and finance in the global south is inevitable. It's inevitable. They also show that individual states that have carbon pricing policies should have dumped the link. Now the rest of it is so regardless. They can just go for who cares now. The defense of the problem. They say conversation is inevitable. That's wrong. What is the work evidence? Is that tipping points have yet to be crossed in every incremental degree matters, which means even if the plan results some sort of warming that still outweighs. And now their evidence about CCS, assuming technology is wrong, evidence is based on climate studies that says the $40 price is sufficient to solve by forcing markets to internalize negative externalities. They say pricing shifts that is wrong because it not assumes the BCA, which taxes imports regardless, which removes the incentive to offshore meta-analysis wrong. Their evidence is about existing pricing regimes that says that those are insufficient. We agree because they had exemptions in the plan insufficient to solve the trade advantage. They got to this too little too late. It's an impact turn to it resolves conflict because it creates economic interdependence that removes the alternative removes economic constraints on war, it causes countries to turn inwards, which causes cooperation over things like proliferation, tech, and disease, which are existential impacts not answered by the law. Trump does not think they concede that Trump will agree to the plan because he likes tariffs, but rather the plan is durable, which means it's a durable compromise and creates a neutral playing field that is WTO compliant. Decay. Case is a massive impact turns to decay. 1. Climate change. Decarbonization is good and follow on is necessary to fuse technology. Globally insurance shift from carbon-intensive assets that outweighs each link to the AFF is equally outweighed by status quo fossil fuel financing, which is worse. 2. Trade. They dropped its key to decouple growth. 3. Trade resilient supply chains. Avoid conflict by cementing interdependence. No turns. Case 1. Corporate capture is wrong because we get durable fail, which means the plan is sufficient. 2. Resource competition is inevitable. There evidence that China and the US are prime for renewables now, which also non-unique their impact. 3. No link to green stagflation. That's status quo. Given the IRA subsidies framework, they must refute this diabolical implementation. Prefer 1. Fairness. There are infinite cases of the 1C, but only we get offense for the plan that outweighs anything else. Sacrifices gain functionality by post hoc altering the terrain of debate. If we win framework, we win the debate because their links are non-unique, and if the alt can solve, then the perm shields. Morality chain analysis is unfair. It's not grounded in the resolution. It adds additional burden to the AFF, which significantly lowers the NEG win condition. It means you should not flip presumption. Our interpretation does not invisible violence. It's additive and not exclusive. You just need unique links. No turns. Case to evidence just as that politicians are elitists. Who cares? Who is given driven by competitive incentives. Now it does not solve fairness and not more accurate policy making. Doubles down above. Now conditionality. They drop the counter interpretation. Dispo solves. I know they might be unreasonable, but they drop the counter interpretation, so you should hold the line. Research outweighs the impact that's dropped. The only skill that can be taken outside debate into the workplace in higher academic is key to clash of the formation, advocacy skills. Dispo solves. 1. Depth over breadth. They force specific research about counterfeits. And so they will run again 1 and C's. 2. Infinite better accuracy. Solve negative flexibility. No cost counterfeits are key. Net flex is inevitable given states. The oral dissets and econ dissets, which answers the rest of that because Dispo solves. Now extinction. Extinction inevitably outweighs. I dare you to find a scenario in any of their evidence that outlines a causal explanation for why the plan uniquely triggers an impact. Permutation do solves the answers their warrants about sustainability because they assume the AFF to uphold capitalist thoughts. The 2C Fox evidence is that it's market intervention, which they agree is good, which is why it does not sever the plan. Their imperial co-option evidence takes out more of the alternative in the AFF because it means that the state cracks down, but we get durable fiat. Now the WTO disputes link. There's no evidence that there's wrong. Their evidence is about the need for global sovereign, which they do not fiat or solve, but the AFF is WTO compliant. That was the case argument above. Now the Brody evidence, there's no link to their evidence about greenwashing and digital infrastructures, which no link. It's not about tax. And then the effect for evidence. 1. EU CBAM dumps. It's what their evidence is about. 2. No offshore ambitions and ensure they get taxed inevitably. 3. Emerging economies. The plan is not better because it erodes trade barriers that facilitate tech diffusion, enabling access to global markets. 4. Carbon is worse. Imports from the global south are bad because it results in violent mining practices, which the plan ends. 5. Case outweighs all their links because none of them are existential. The impact. No econ nationalism link. All their recuts of the 1C evidence describes current attitudes in Congress. Competition is inevitable. That was above. Trade solves harmonization. Does not block out China because it forces them to have a domestic tax, which means our tariffs do not apply. China rights is broadly inevitable, but it's bad because it creates centralization of supply chains, which causes disruptions. Now it does not result in conflict. The recut of Oppenheimer is out because it says that protectionism triggers that sustainability is not negative. The app makes it sustainable by taxing carbons, which answers all their warrants. The alt fails. 1 is too slow. Imminence of warming demands. Swift, bold climate action. Decentralized planning and worker resistance cannot scale fast enough. 2. Sabotage fails. Banks do not care. CEOs of Exxon will laugh at it, and the government crackdown means workers cannot afford. That is statistically true. Results in populist backlash. Hello, we just reelected Trump, so obviously non-unique all their offense, but means it doubles the ability of alternative to solve. 3. Theory. They drop from our framework interpretation from the 2EC. Fiat must mean the alternative has to be at the same scope of the AFF, otherwise it's unfair and creates being AFF impossible. With the supply chains impact, the disruptions cause nuclear war, results in commodity shortages that escalate to nuclear conflicts.
732. yeah, I'm gonna wait for.
Oh, I didn't realize it wasn't here. Okay. I looked down the table.
Okay, Henry, can you hear me? Awesome. It's going to be the K straight down, and then the case in the order. Okay. Okay. Is anybody not ready?
The debate is over when they spend one line on the China link that guarantees China war. They have conceded the sustainability debate and that the alternative solves case. There are a half dozen reasons why try or die obviously flips negative. Your impact turning supply chain resilience in the plan reproduces the security, sustainability, and access policy documents proof is incorporated into an array of geopolitical anxieties that magnify the growth of the supply chain and warfare, which guarantees war with China for miscalculation, false threat perceptions, dropped impact. There are Jane, there are Sullivan, Jane, and Stokes cards all say that China is a threat and explicitly say the plan requires and contributes to rising economic nationalism. They cannot go for a B model, so we integrate them into 2ER. When the Sullivan specifically says that adversaries like China should be excluded from the AFF's harmonized regime, they also have no impact defense degree nationalism broadly, which all the recuts substantiate that the AFF is vectored into for conflict against China. Trump uses CBAs to tax exports and coerce the EU to rapidly increase taxation of Chinese exports, as well as any regional cooperation with China, which triggers the internal link to World War III 2 years before their 2026 argument in the Jane evidence. So they care clean out of the water, it takes out the warming impact. But try or die means internally goes negative. So we have two internal links to extinction that take out the AFF on time frame. Only response was that the link is its scope. It's our uniqueness that the plan is vectored into an existing array of geopolitical anxieties that flip implementation, which means that our impact about 1 hour was purely defensive on the link, which means there's a massive risk of it. The 2 hour cannot grandstand on defense outweighs on case on time from its scope. It makes warming and trade impossible to solve. Economic competition and green national and create rally around the flag effects that prevent adaptation channels, clean energy to state sovereignty, and constrains the capacity for regulations to do anything but escalate competition while magnifying the risk of a disorderly transition. Independently flips the sustainability debate means they can't solve warming. Also makes global protectionism and trade fractures inevitable in a world of heightened fiscal conflict over transition markets. Only out in the 2 hour is that trade solves conflict via interdependence. No, they've dropped the alternative solves case. Plus, there's obviously still trade and social economic systems, which takes that out. Dropping the Jackson link is also brutal and takes out this because they've conceded that capitalism shapes trade into regional antagonistic blocks that cause geopolitical escalation rather than global harmonization, which flips Oppenheimer proves that protectionism is inevitable in the world of the affirmative, especially with functional concession of the above link debate and re-highlighting an independent turn to the case proves that we internally trade. The alternative is try or die for a truly free global trade regime. Also, 5-point line by line of the Martin evidence to AC drop, which means they can't go for this terminal defense with that quality. Means you should reject it for bias. It proves our own solvency arguments by interconnection, and it assumes disrupted foreign market access, not direct action, which disproves all of their case turns at the top because they've dropped the socialist economies obviously trade to, and it solves case. The framework debate try or die terminally flips negative because their interpret assumes linearity at the expense of examining complex feedback loops. They make military conflict inevitable, dropped rather than contained by attempting to fix the scope in advance when it's really our imaginaries of the supply chain that determine the direction of foreign conflict, which is our 1 AOC is designed to mystify as a justification for nationalist diversionary war and a favor for policy implementation. Specifically when it comes to clean energy is non-linear, spent for cascading risks of warming. Linear policy analysis cannot demonstrate whether the AFF is able to solve its impact, which obviously turns their clash and simulation offense proves why our KF fiat is true and why you should be starting with value chains analysis instead of what the AFF does. They have dropped all over warrants for why it solves fairness. They've dropped it about what it's about how you evaluate ground, not what the ground is itself, and that all of our links to the plan, which proves that we have unique disadvantages. Meaning, it also frames the alternative debate for winning. The affirmative is functionally disclosed, and the squad is causing extinction. All we have to do is win a sliver of solvency because the AFF is reinvesting in a fundamentally unjust system. The alternative debate, it was massive. It's logistical resistance, leveraging supply chain toward mobility nodes of liquidity to streamline collapse into democratic workers' cooperatives. Two arguments frame out their offense. First, nationalization transition is impossible now. Is our uniqueness. The ALT creates breaches of self-evidence that reveal the inherent weaknesses of supply chain infrastructure, while in concurrently disparate social movements with logistical understanding of value chains proves that their deficits are based on a fundamentally incorrect reading of the political situation that you should reject. Two, Suwandi drops says that connecting academic and public discussions about supply chain propels new forms of education that propel movements. Not having all the answers now is good and is a net benefit to our model of debate because it engenders the skills that craft more ethical orientation towards the economy and finance, which obviously frame out to the blippy 1 AR extensions that were not tied to any piece of evidence and were new in the 1 AR they've dropped. That the alt is the only way to solve either of their impacts. It's try or die for warming. It's inevitable. In this quote, only the alt has a chance of radical transition to reorient economic imperatives and technological distribution, and it solves trade harmonization by engendering a global order that doesn't rely on antagonistic trade policies and geopolitical weapons. Dropping the alternative solves case, I think, means that you can wrap up your ballot now because there was only a risk of the link debate and the sustainability debate, meaning the alternative trades off with the alternative also frames the permutation because any risk of a deficit means it outweighs us, also means it outweighs now the sustainability debate. It was cold dropped, game over, unless they prove that they can resolve 100% of our scenarios, each of them provide uniqueness for our links, and the alternative and prove that tried flips neg. Because collapse is coming now, it's an impact you know is happening will cause extinction. It also frames out their ability to solve warming or obviously harmonize global trade, which means that even if they create sustainability with warming or trade, they obviously trade off with financial and fiscal sustainability. They've dropped the slasher evidence that says that illicit finance magnifies global inequality, causes social disintegration, and lowers the long-term rate of profit via anonymous companies, tax havens, secret jurisdictions, and trade manipulation. Those are all examples of the circumvention evidence we're going for, which makes collapse and stagflation crisis inevitable, which obviously turn the AFF and outweigh on scope. I'm going to do condo at the bottom of the K. They dropped the Fox evidence. The permutation was a one-sentence extension, so don't let them grant into the 2AR, but they dropped the AFF to meet their own burden in the Fox evidence because it endorses policy to reduce fiscal inequality, which the case and link debate proved that you expand. Plus, we're not all saying that all policies are banned, just that yours sucks. We've preempted the Kraken arguments of the 2 and C because I know it was good what they're going to grant it on. There were no warrants. They've dropped the pretty tight example I gave of Houthis, which means you should have an incredibly high bar for this offense in the 2AR. I don't have to go for the Badastani evidence because we are crushing them so hard in the try or die debate, but it's framed out by try or die, which is 1AR blip, hold the line, and they've dropped the Geldinus evidence that there is a massive risk of a crackdown for any risk of in cooperation with the imperial state. They've entered the FEFR evidence, which is the one link I didn't extend. There's no warrant for all too slow. It all creates rapid action, and any risk of link proves the AFF engenders mass crises that flip time frame and trade off banks. Don't care is unwarranted, and I've already spelled this out like 5 times in cross-6 in the 2 and C. No theory argument about the drop framework. Interrupt 1 and no warrant, hold the line in the 2AR. 2, they dropped the alternative isn't fiated, so there's no link. And 3, they consider the Kemper-X evidence of framework that there was inherent public-private entanglement and inherent to normal means, which means that they also inherently fiat private actors too, so we meet conditionality. 1AR was too blippy for a 2AR and condo. Obviously, a cowardly attempt to get out of a debate on substance that they're clearly losing. They dropped this on a vote to prove that we made debate impossible, which they didn't do, which means you should have a high threshold. The only impact they extended was research incentives without internal link to it and dropping counter triple 1, which checks out because we are incentivized to in-depth research. The only position that we get, and there's no impact to it because our can't solve models of debate, only punishing our behavior, but they drop reasonability to drop risk aversion. Condos better for research because the scope is one option is to incentivize negative innovation, so we have a fallback option as well. Can't solve because it lets the app determine our strategy, so humans read the positions right up around, which trade term research also drop reasonability, no functional difference given between dispo and condo, which means you shouldn't throw out all of your substance on arbitrary non-resolutional theory arguments, which turns the only possible impact to research, which is education. 4, logic drop the only rule of the neg is to disprove the AFF's desirability. They also didn't explain how dispo solves any of their offense. Finance, 1AR multiple carded presumption arguments, which means even if it's not an independent offense, it short circuits any ability for the AFF to solve, which means it is try or die for alternatives to reorient global commodity chains away from exploitation. I do not want to hear a ballot on try or die of flips affirmative when we hear read multiple pieces of evidence that the alternative solves all their offense, whereas the only risk that the sustainability crisis coming now means that try or die flips negative.
227.
You're going to want to card down.
Yes.
just be standing recording.
Sometimes they're not, they don't have a timer that beeps.
Oops. Alright, Henry, you can hear me? Alright. The order is the warming advantage, and then the K. Everyone good? The nexus question of this debate is whether or not a carbon tax is sufficient to resolve climate change. If the answer is yes, vote AFF because they've conceded the premise that extinction outweighs and only we have a material strategy capable of resolving it. The plan solves a carbon tax at $40 directly imposes costs on markets who create negative externalities by releasing emissions. It forces a transition away because it makes renewables cost competitive and alters consumer demand by raising the price of emitting. Additionally, what's important is that the plan solves via follow-on. They've dropped the plan. The plan's BCA forces the globe to transition away. That matters because even if there are structural barriers that the NEG outlines, none can overwhelm the significant cost of our BCA and tax that creates world incentives to adopt their own prices in response because other countries know if they do not, they will be taxed to oblivion. That outweighs because warming causes extinction. It pushes ecosystems beyond their ability to adapt, disrupts food webs, and destabilizes environments through stressors like changing temperatures, rainfall, and ocean acidification that interact with existing vulnerabilities. It causes cascading failures in ecosystem resilience. And also, but before all of that, it causes climate wars that exacerbate tensions through resource shortages that magnify poor governance and economic hardship, which drive instability. The NEG just asserts that resource shortages don't cause extinction. There's no warrant for that. Now the turn proper. They didn't have time to extend any of their warrants, but there's no link. Transition is inevitable. The clean energy will overtake oil and fossil fuels within the next decade. Countries will be forced to switch to climate financing reliant on the U.S., but it'll be too late, and climate change will have killed us all. This zeroes every link they've gone for, even on the K2, because it doesn't factor in inevitability. This is the classic try or die ballot you judges should give because it means the only chance for value change to be resisted is if those protests and the alt strategies are not swallowed by the rising seas or succumb to a zoonotic disease, or they literally cannot breathe because our oceans would be dead by the time their protests can stop a truck transporting gas to your local Shell station. Now, dropping climate wars also answers and turns their only existential impact in this debate. Climate change will sap resources and incentivize nationalist conflicts to secure resources because climate affects our ability to grow food and necessary resources like water, which creates an impetus to go to war. It turns their China arguments and flips try or die because geopolitical anxieties become inevitable. The sustainability stuff is irrelevant because the only warrant in the 2NR is illicit financing, but you should question how that means it becomes impossible for the AFF to solve climate change considering the 2NR functionally dropped everything from case, the K. This try or die stuff is really, really simple. When the 2NR concedes a renewable transition is coming now, it flips try or die because they haven't impacted out and impact to sustainability. But we have explained that the renewable transition that is happening in the status quo is not happening fast enough to solve warming, but is happening fast enough to thump all of their links. Now, dropping the trade advantage also means that you should presume the AFF solves competition with China. It's inevitable now because of Trump's tariffs that will explicitly target China, but the plan solves because it signals cooperation. The BCA in the plan is equal to the domestic price, which means it's not discriminatory, and China will respond through cooperation. That's the 1EC Kaufman evidence. But any doubt that you have about this means that you should just vote AFF on presumption because all of their link evidence is about how tariffs cause China to respond, which is non-unique by the 1EC Rapier evidence that says that Trump will increase tariffs tenfold, but only the plan can make them effective and result in cooperation. And now trade is an impact, also an impact turn to the alt, which will be explained later. Now, framework. Weigh the consequences of the plan against a competitive alternative. The sole question of your ballot is to determine whether or not an endorsement of carbon tax is a desirable proposal and outweighs the impacts of their links. This is the most reasonable interpretation by preserving a role for the AFF and the NEG. They get everything that they've said in this debate, but it must be tied to a reason that the plan itself is a bad idea, not the status quo. This is the best, most logical middle ground. Anything else undermines the foundation of the debate. The impact is fairness. Debate is a game strategy over-determines pedagogy because of competitive incentives to win, which means the ballot can only solve our offense. Ensuring an equitable opportunity to win is indispensable. is indispensable. The collective thousands of hours we invest in debate originates from the expectation that we all have a chance to win in a fair competitive setting. Drop that is the only impact that matters and links to our representations, discourse, and value chains. It's an unfair interpretation that significantly lowers the neg win condition. You can concede that non-resolutional, or actually, never mind. There are infinite tangential critiques of epistemology and representations they could cherry pick, spilling over into infinite regress. The link that they've gone for is about anxiety over China, which is not unique to the plan. So if we win framework, we win the debate because it proves their links are not unique to the plan. The perm is compatible, and even if the impacts of the links do not outweigh climate change, also the 2NR agrees with the frame that extinction outweighs. So if we win that our value chain analysis stops climate change, then it means that our research is good. Now, the permutation perm do both solves all of their offense. Links are irrelevant if the plan solves the impact to them, or they are inevitable in the status quo. If we win that the links are not unique to the plan, the perm is an easy way to resolve residual offense that you do not know what to do with. Now, the alternative, it totally fails. Dropping supply chain disruptions and lack of trade causes nuclear war. The alt sabotages supply chains and transportation, which results in populist leaders taking over and makes their only impact inevitable. Now, the fact that they don't fiat the alternative is what is going to lose them the debate. This makes this functionally a framework debate because they cannot solve for any of their any of their impacts every time they talk about shifting trade relations or scaling the economy away from supply chains that would cause climate change. They do not actually do any of that because this has functionally become about a mindset shift, because they do not fiat that anyone goes out and sabotages these supply chains or does any of the things that their alt evidence indicates is necessary to solve any of the links that they are going for. Now, it also fails because it is too slow to solve, warming the imminence of it. It requires swift, bold action to deal with the crisis. The alt's decentralized planning and worker resistance, if scaled, still would not scale fast enough. Think logically, they first have to organize, then identify weak points of the supply chain, and then launch strategic attacks to collapse it, and then hope that those attacks are successful enough to cause the world to immediately stop polluting. With the plan, you are certain that a carbon tax immediately changes incentives to stop polluting. Now, lastly, the perm solves. If it is capable of solving the issues with sustainability, then the alt will overcome the links because it is functionally a tax that intervenes in the markets and regulates them into oblivion, and results in an ethical paradigm that won't inflame China. Now, there are no trade wars. They dropped that the AFF is WTO compliant and results in a corporation with China, so it's try or die AFF.